Hey everybody, this is Ferg from the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast. Do not adjust your YouTube player. I am helping out Willie with his Arcade USA contest. A few weeks ago, he posted a video stating that he was close to 3,000 subscribers, which is great. Congratulations, Willie. And to celebrate that fact, he was giving away an Atari Flashback Portable. So all you had to do to enter the contest is to comment on the video with your Atari 2600 memories, and I'm going to read some of the highlights and then I'll announce the winner at the end. So please bear with me if I do not pronounce your name correctly. So Captain Needle says, "Hi, I remember when our family got the VCS in the late 70s. I think we got the one with the combat pack-in and I quickly monopolized it. I remember Christmas gifts meant picking out which Atari game had the best screenshots or best titles. I remember my dad scolding me for almost destroying a CX40 joystick in a rage after losing at basketball too many times." I can relate to that. Tonk 822, I think, or Tonk 82, I'm not sure. "My favorite one has to be Yar's Revenge. Unique concept and very addictive. I can play it when I feel like it, and I enjoy it 100%. I'm from Europe, though. You should probably choose somebody closer to you." No, I don't think Willie minds shipping things overseas. Starblazers 1969 said, "My favorite memory of the Atari 2600 is when I used to stay over at my friend's house and we would play the Atari until 2 in the morning in the early 80s. We would play all the classics like Space Invaders, Combat, River Raid, Asteroids, and Target Fun. I do have the original system and the games that we played, but sometimes wish that I was young again so I could experience this time all over again." Yeah, I can relate to that. Texas Ranger said, "My favorite 2600 memory was the surprise of getting the Atari for my birthday in 1982 for my grandma. I was so excited and didn't want to go to school the next day because I wanted to play it nonstop. Pac-Man and Combat were the first games I played. My favorites were Space Invaders, River Raid, Jungle Hunt, and Adventure." Radine 2K says, "A favorite 2600 game? Gotta be Tunnel Runner. That's a good one. Amazing game given the technical limitations of the 2600. Think Pac-Man meets 3D Monster Maze with 4 monsters chasing you, randomly generated maps, and fast and furious white knuckle skid marks in your underwear gameplay." I like to see what a white knuckle, white knuckle, skid marks in your underwear. Sorry about that. I can't begin to guess how many hours I lost to that game. That is a great game. Z Bunker says, "I remember my first Atari-induced seizure. Oh, it was just like it happened yesterday. Everything was going fine one day, then I decided to play this game called Yar's Revenge. It was a really fun game. I got good at it and defeated the boss. Then, holds back tears, I saw colors no man should ever see. What happened? I was being attacked by light and patterns that were not human-made. I started twitching. I fell on the ground. I started reciting the Pledge of Allegiance with a Scottish accent. I had an uncontrollable urge to eat Lucky Charms. I collapsed on the living room's shag carpet and woke up in 1992 to the sounds of Super Mario World. What the hell happened? Curse you, Yars. Curse you to hell." Well, that was very imaginative. Atari 2600 Dude says, "My first gaming console was a 2600 Vader back in 1982. It came bundled with Space Invaders, Asteroids, Missile Command, and Berserk." Wow, that's a lot. "Still collect it for now, and it remains my all-time favorite console. So nostalgic and so many memories." Electric Adventures says, "Out of all the games produced by Atari themselves, my favorite would be Phoenix. Very close representation of the arcade game. But my absolute favorite would have to be Sequest by Activision. Just pipping Hero and River Raid." Oh, that's an interesting word. I've never heard pipping before, but you do spell favorite with a U, so I have to assume that's some kind of European thing. Richard Herzog says, "So many memories of playing the Atari 2600. One of my favorite memories is back in the early 80s, and I loved going to the arcade and decided to build my first arcade cabinet and put a TV in it, and of course powered by the Atari 2600. We inserted the joysticks in TV and had our own Atari arcade cabinet." That's great. I could never do something like that when I was a kid. I didn't have the imagination for that. Someone named the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast said, "Congrats, Willie. My favorite 2600 memory is probably getting it for Christmas in 1980. In a roundabout way, it has led me to be friends with really awesome people like Willie." And Willie actually commented on this and said, "Hey, Ferg, I already gave you one." Yes, he did, and I thank Willie for that. Willie actually sent me an Atari Flashback Portable, all loaded up and ready to go. So thank you very much for that, Willie. George Starcher says, "My favorite games for the 2600 were Kaboom, Pitfall, Adventure, Space Invaders, and Warlords." That's a great list. I remember playing Kaboom with my friend at his house. His dad would make us ham and cheese roll-ups on toothpicks as snacks. Oh, that's cool. Michael D'Angelo says, love your videos and podcasts. Started listening to you on the 5200 podcast and then searched for your other podcast. The 2600 was my first console and will probably always be my favorite. Still love playing these games. Old School NYC Gamer says, I really had to think about it, and it was hard to think of one game I played solidly back then because I had a good 25 plus games or so back in those days. It would have to be Space Invaders because between all the different settings on it and playing against my sisters, it was fun as heck. That's true. There's, I think, 112 variations on there. Only 16 from one player, but it was pretty cool to play against your sister like I did. Treadway Rocky says, I still really enjoy the artwork. I just got the Atari art book, and it's wonderful. And he's referring to The Art of Atari by Tim Lapatino. I'm still waiting to get mine, but I hear it's excellent. Besides that, I remember getting 1,000,000 points on Defender for the 2600 and feeling pretty good about it. I think that is something you can feel good about. Cara C said, I was the youngest in my family, and my brothers had a 2600. I used to play all their games, and they had some good ones. My favorite one would have to be Mario Brothers. I sat there for hours and played that when my brothers were in school. It was the only time I could play the system. I guess they were hogging it. Matthew Edwards says, this is great, Willie. Thanks. My favorite Atari 2600 memory is waking up on Saturday morning, pre-breakfast, still wearing my footy pajamas and playing Asteroids and hearing the Extra Life McDonald's fries are up sound. Yes, so I was not the only one who thought it sounded like the fries are up. Then having some pancakes while watching cartoons, and once done with that, diving into some Space Invaders. Nicholas McGregor says, my favorite Atari memory is kind of a two-parter. When I was a kid, my much older cousin had Adventure, and I would watch him play it, and I would play it, and I was entranced by it. But I never saw it end. I borrowed a copy from a coworker last year and sat down with graphing paper and a pencil and mapped it out like it was 1980 something all over again. That's great. I beat the game in Mode 2 and then used my hand-drawn maps and a Google search to also find the Easter egg in Mode 2. I really want to play Adventure 2, but have not been fortunate enough to get my hands on any of the flashbacks that have it. Yeah, it is on, I haven't actually played it either. It is on the, I think starting with the Flashback 6 maybe, and it's on the Portable too. Earl Green wrote a comment here. He's from the Escape Pod podcast and also Select Game, which is an Odyssey 2 podcast. He says, I remember Christmas 1983 was dominated by two things, Star Wars Micro Collection playsets and game cartridges, since by this time we had both a 2600 and an Odyssey 2. One of the cartridges was Skyjinx for the 2600, and after everything was opened, it was pretty much expected that I was going to play some games. Everyone gathered around to watch me play Skyjinx, and I pretty much killed it on the entry-level difficulty. And the game ended. My mother, accustomed to me playing O2 games for hours, said, that's it? She hadn't read the manual and wasn't aware there were variations. She was really, really unimpressed. I thought it was kind of funny. It wasn't until I was older that I understood this actually meant I paid full retail for that, and that's all it does. It's okay, Mom. I still like Skyjinx. Oh, boy. Pozarogo said, when I was 4, one of my first memories was I was playing Joust with my older brother, and I got so mad that he kept winning that I grabbed his controller from his hand by the cord, and I hit him in the head as hard as I could with the controller. Oh, my gosh. Then he started crying really loud, and I started crying really loud, so my mom came in and started yelling at him, leave your sister alone. Oh, that is hilarious. Down the Rabbit Hole says, my earliest and most memorable Atari experience was the first weekend I got my 2600. I started playing Space Invaders around 11 p.m. and my cousin headed out to do his night shift work at the hospital. I played a bunch before I got sleepy and my cousin walked back into the room. I looked up and said, I thought you were going to work, and he said, I did. It's 8 hours later. Yes, the time do pass when you're playing the Atari 2600. MT Shark says, congratulations, Willie. My favorite Atari game is Pitfall 2. I was blown away that there would be background music in an Atari game. I never knew that was possible. My favorite memory is when I modded my Atari 2600 for AV S-Video and added LED lights to make it glow at night, as well as adding a pause mode to it. Out of all my Atari consoles, that one is my go-to console to play and enjoy. TechRat says, my all-time favorite has always been Yar's Revenge. The gameplay is just awesome. It's all skill, but what really sold the game to me as a kid was the comic. You actually got backstory on characters, and that 80s art style still sticks with me. My next favorite was Mattel's Frogs and Flies. It's simple, but I could play it for hours. I would occasionally leave the game over screen on the TV just so I could hear the digital crickets playing in the background. That's really cool. MR, oh gosh, Murmurlisk. I don't know. I'm sorry. The best thing about the Atari 2600 was the multiplayer games. I spent many an hour battling at Joust, Combat, and Fishing Derby. One of the nice things about having less memory to program complex AI routines is that by necessity some games were multiplayer only, which is fine by me, since I never owned a 2600 and only had access at a friend's house. You were always assured of getting equal playtime when there wasn't a single-player game option. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. Old Red said, my father had an Atari 2600 Junior with only 2 games, Pac-Man and a tennis game, which might have been simply called tennis, but I don't remember anymore. I usually played in the living room as a child, so my parents were always there. But one day when my parents were out, I plugged the system in and wanted to play a round of Pac-Man. Worst mistake of my life. I was very young at that time, and being chased by ghosts while running through a labyrinth collecting dots, or squares in this case, was just too much for me. Oh no. I was so scared of this experience that I never touched the system again when I was home alone. Well, some people are frightened of 2600 Pac-Man for other reasons, so I guess you're in good company. Rockman X 2002 says, my favorite Atari 2600 memory is spending late nights as a very young kid playing Pitfall 2 and trying to find every last treasure in the game and going for the perfect score. I don't think I ever actually achieved a perfect score, but I do remember mapping out the game and making notes about where every treasure was located. And that wonderful music. Yes, definitely. That background music is permanently etched somewhere in my brain. That one is still one of my favorites to this day. Ghost Rock VGS says, my favorite memory of the Atari 2600 is that this is the only console that my whole family ever played together. My dad wasn't a big game guy, and especially not a video game guy, but I have such fond memories of playing games like Circus Atari and just laughing and having fun together. I don't think my dad has played a video game since, even though my mom and sister often played games with me on various old and modern consoles. Happy Snout Hour says, I remember when I first got my Atari 2600 on my birthday in the early 80s. I had gotten Pac-Man on it, which was my favorite game of all time, but I remembered I cried because the game was nothing like the arcade. You and a million other people, happy Snout Hour. It didn't really play like it either. I have learned to love it since then and have plenty of fond memories, including playing Pitfall 2 when it first came out, which blew my mind as it was great looking and had good music. I have so many great memories of it now. Drano Pace says, I was 8 when my mom and I walked home with the 2600 from the mall. She said it was for my cousin and I was sad for 2 weeks. After we opened all the Christmas presents, my mom had one left for me from Santa. That 2600 was my favorite present ever. That's funny. Ben Hughes says, my mother used to tell people about how I used to hook up the Atari 2600 we had when I was 3 years old in 1984. The thing is, I personally don't remember doing that. Yeah, I have things that my parents tell me that I don't remember at all either. I remember playing it that young, and I remember Donkey Kong being my favorite game, but I have no memory of ever connecting it to the TV anytime I felt like it. I don't know, that kind of sounds a little dangerous. S.J. Merlin says, hi, Willie. First off, many thanks for all the great videos and podcasts. I second that. And congratulations on the growing number of subscribers. I can't believe the 2600 is soon going to be 40 years old. Wow, that's crazy. I was 18 years old when it first was released. Wow, and I've been a fan ever since. It's great to see this humble little system is still popular today. Although I couldn't afford one back in the day, I have one now, 4-switch wood grain, and I enjoy playing it often. Many thanks for donating the portable for the prize giveaway. All the very best from Stephen J. Simon Belmundo says, hi, Willie. My favorite 2600 memory was my first play of Carnival by Sega. Well, it's a good thing you didn't have it in television. My father was crippled by rheumatism arthritis, but he somehow got me to the nearest arcade at 5 years old. I remember seeing Carnival at my local arcade. He would give me quarters for it. He attempted to buy it from the owner, but only to find out we couldn't own one due to gambling machines against a lease agreement. Bummer. But one day my brother told me about how there was a system for your home called the Atari 2600. When I found out, I flipped on finding out that Carnival was on it. I never got a 2600 until 13 years later, but that memory stays with me forever. That's cool. Mark Maurice, I think. Sorry, Mark. My favorite 2600 memory was when I got my first 2600 after breaking my collarbone. Ooh, that sounds bad. I broke my collarbone at school and had to be rushed to the ER. When my mom showed up, she asked if there was anything she could get me to make me feel better. Oh, boy. I said I wanted an Atari. My brother and dad drove out to one of the local stores, Zayre's, I think, and picked up a system. I was in one of the waiting rooms when my dad came in and held up the box. Wow, that's pretty cool. Helix DE Slayer says, Atari 2600 was my first system. In 1992, I was about 5, and I was helping get Christmas stuff out of my parents' attic. There was a box with a Vader 2600 and about 20 games. I brought it downstairs and asked my parents about it, not knowing what it was. They set it up for me, and I've been hooked since. I now have right over 400 cards for it. See, I love stuff like this. And, you just found it by accident. You had no idea what it was. And this is right in the middle of the 16-bit wars. And you're playing Atari 2600 and enjoying it. That's great. All right, Willie picked a winner at random, and the winner is... it's a bunch of letters. CCDBC Rider 1. You gotta get that 1 in there. So Willie says, thanks to everyone for participating, and a great big thanks to all my subscribers. I definitely second that. Willie does a great job. He does so many different kinds of videos. He does Pinball Electronica. He does Arcade USA, where he goes across the United States and visits arcades and does videos of them. A lot of different modding videos and how to fix stuff. Willie does a great job. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for me also for everybody that subscribes to Willie. Oh, Willie also says, thanks to Ferg, my favorite Atari 2600 podcaster. I think, what is there, 2 of us? Me and Bill, that's it. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks for subscribing. And tell your friends about Arcade USA and get them to subscribe too so we can get Willie up to 3,000.
Thanks for watching.